For 32 years, I devoted my life to Riverside Community Hospital. 32 years of missed birthdays, canceled vacations, and endless overnight shifts. As head nurse of the cardiac unit, I witnessed countless heartbreaks and miracles, while sacrificing much of my personal life for my patients. Every holiday worked meant a child's life saved. Every overnight shift meant a family would stay whole. And I never once complained, because helping others wasn't just my profession. It was my calling. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me when I found myself on the other side of the hospital bed. After 3 decades of caring for cardiac patients, my own heart betrayed me. The triple bypass surgery was successful, but the recovery would be long. 6 months minimum before I could return to full duties, if at all. As I lay in the recovery room, tubes and monitors surrounding me, I realized I was experiencing everything my patients had gone through. The fear, the vulnerability, the absolute dependence on others. Jenny, my only daughter, stood by my bedside, her husband Mark hovering awkwardly near the door. I could see the worry etched across her face, but there was something else there too, something I couldn't quite identify. "How are you feeling, Mom?" she asked, adjusting my blanket with the precision of someone desperately needing a task to occupy their hands. "Like I've been hit by a truck," I replied, attempting a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. "But the doctors say everything went well." Jenny nodded, glancing at Mark, who seemed unusually interested in his phone. Something was wrong. After raising a child on your own, you develop a sixth sense for these things. "What is it?" I asked, my voice still raspy from the intubation. "Whatever it is, just tell me." Jenny sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "We need to talk about what happens after you're discharged. The doctor says you'll need significant help for at least the first few months." "I know," I said. "I've been saving for years. I can hire a home health aide for the initial recovery period." Jenny and Mark exchanged a glance that made my heart monitor skip a beat. "The thing is, Mom," Jenny continued, her voice taking on that patronizing tone adults use with children. "Mark and I have been talking. We don't think you should go back to that big old house by yourself, not after something like this." "I'll be fine once I recover," I insisted. "I've lived there for 20 years. "Mom," Jenny's voice sharpened, "you're 63 years old. You just had major heart surgery. Maybe this is a sign that it's time to downsize. There's a lovely assisted living facility near us in Meadowbrook. We toured it last week." Last week? They had been touring retirement homes while I was preparing for surgery? "I'm not ready for assisted living," I said firmly, "and I'm certainly not selling my house." Jenny's expression hardened. "You need to be realistic. You can't work anymore, at least not the way you used to. Your medical bills are piling up, even with insurance. And frankly, Mom, Mark and I can't put our lives on hold to take care of you." The monitor beside me beeped faster. "I never asked you to." "Look," Mark finally spoke, stepping forward. "We've got Tyler's private school tuition, the mortgage on the lake house, and Jenny's business is just taking off. We can't afford to hire round-the-clock care for you, and we certainly can't have you moving in with us." I stared at my son-in-law, momentarily speechless. In all the years he'd been married to my daughter, I'd never heard him speak so bluntly about finances, especially not mine. "I don't need your money," I said quietly. "And I certainly don't need to move in with you." Jenny sighed dramatically. "Then what's your plan, Mom?" "Because from where we're standing, you're becoming a burden we can't afford, financially or emotionally." A burden. The word hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd sacrificed, after helping them with the down payment on their Meadowbrook mansion, after babysitting Tyler every weekend so they could attend their social events, after lending Jenny the startup funds for her boutique clothing line. I was a burden. I didn't respond to Jenny's callous statement. Perhaps it was the anesthesia, still clouding my judgment, or maybe it was the decades of putting others first. But I simply closed my eyes, feigning exhaustion. The nurse must have noticed the spike in my heart rate because she came in shortly after, suggesting my visitors leave so I could rest. As the door closed behind Jenny and Mark, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling tiles. 32 years, at Riverside, and this was how it ended. Not with the retirement party my colleagues had been planning, but with tubes in my chest and my only child calling me a burden. What Jenny didn't know, what I had never told anyone in my family, was that I wasn't just head nurse Ellen Thompson. For the past 12 years, I had been silently building something they couldn't possibly imagine. It began with a patient safety protocol I developed after a near-fatal medication error. The system was simple but effective, using color-coded badges and verification steps that reduced medication errors by 78% in our unit. When the hospital implemented it hospital-wide, medication errors dropped by 65% in the first year alone. Dr. Michael Bennett, Riverside's chief administrator, encouraged me to present my protocol at a healthcare conference. Reluctantly, I agreed. I had never seen myself as anything special, just a nurse doing her job. But that conference changed everything. A representative from Central Health Systems approached me afterward. They wanted to license my protocol for their network of hospitals across 3 states. With Dr. Bennett's guidance and support from Riverside's legal team, I negotiated a licensing agreement that included ongoing royalties. I could have used that first check to buy a new car or renovate my modest home. Instead, I established the Central City Medical Foundation with a focus on patient safety initiatives and nursing education. Over the years, as my protocol was adopted by more and more hospitals, the foundation grew. I remained head nurse, living in the same house, driving the same 10-year-old sedan, while quietly directing the foundation's activities with the help of a small, dedicated board. Only Dr. Bennett and my closest colleague, Rachel Wilson, knew about the foundation. Not because I was hiding it exactly, but because it had never seemed relevant to my personal life. Jenny had shown little interest in my career beyond occasional complaints about my long hours, and I had grown accustomed to keeping my professional achievements to myself. Now, lying in that hospital bed with my daughter's words echoing in my mind, "You're becoming a burden," I felt a strange sense of clarity emerging through the pain and medication haze. Perhaps it was time to let the worlds collide. Rachel visited the next morning, bringing my favorite hand lotion and a stack of nursing journals. Unlike Jenny, she sat comfortably in the visitor's chair, unfazed by the medical equipment surrounding me. "You look terrible," she said with the blunt honesty of a friend who had seen you through your worst days. "Feel worse," I admitted. "But not just from the surgery." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What happened?" I told her about Jenny and Mark's visit, watching her expression shift from surprise to outrage. "A burden?" Rachel repeated incredulously. "You've got to be kidding me. After everything you've done for them?" Apparently, paying for half of Tyler's private school tuition and helping with their mortgage when Mark was between jobs doesn't buy much goodwill these days. Rachel shook her head, gray curls bouncing with the motion. "What are you going to do?" I adjusted my position, wincing at the pain in my chest. "I think it's time for some changes. The foundation board meeting is scheduled for next week." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I want you to go in my place." Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "What do you want me to tell them?" "That I'm accelerating the nursing education initiative, and that I want to explore establishing a cardiac rehabilitation center here at Riverside, with a focus on supporting patients through long-term recovery." "Ellen," Rachel leaned forward, "that's a multi-million-dollar project. The board will have questions." "Then it's time they had answers," I replied, starting with the fact that I'll be stepping into the role of full-time executive director once I've recovered. Rachel's surprise gave way to a slow smile. About time. You've been playing dual roles for too long. She paused, studying me. What about Jenny? Are you going to tell her about the foundation? I considered the question, remembering the dismissive tone in Jenny's voice. The way Mark had talked about my financial situation as if I were a charity case they couldn't afford to support. Not yet, I decided. First, I need to establish some boundaries. Make it clear that while I may need physical help during recovery, I am not a financial burden or a problem to be solved. And how will you do that? Rachel asked. I'm going to hire the best home healthcare nurse in Riverside, move forward with the Cardiac Rehabilitation Center project, and show my daughter that her mother is far from finished. I managed a small smile. But I might need your help getting there. Rachel squeezed my hand. You've been there for every crisis in my life for 30 years. Just tell me what you need. What I needed, as it turned out, was more complicated than either of us anticipated. The following day, Dr. Bennett visited, bringing news that should have been delivered in happier circumstances. The board voted unanimously to name the new cardiac wing after you, he announced, pulling up a chair. Beside my bed, the Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center. It was supposed to be announced at your retirement party next month. I blinked back unexpected tears. I didn't know there was a new cardiac wing in the works. We've been planning it for 2 years, Dr. Bennett explained. The final funding came through last month. Construction begins in 60 days. Under normal circumstances, this news would have been cause for celebration. Instead, I found myself explaining about Jenny's reaction to my surgery and my decision to accelerate my transition to the foundation. Dr. Bennett listened thoughtfully, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the fluorescent hospital lights. I understand, wanting to establish boundaries with your daughter. But Ellen, you've earned this recognition. Don't let family drama diminish that achievement. I'm not sure I can face a retirement party now, I admitted. Not with things as they are with Jenny. The party can wait, he assured me. Focus on your recovery. But the naming ceremony for the cardiac center is scheduled for 6 months from now. It would mean a lot to the staff to have you there. 6 months, the same time frame for my recovery. It felt symbolic somehow, a deadline. For healing both my heart and my relationship with my daughter. I was discharged a week later, not to Jenny's Meadowbrook mansion or the assisted living facility she had toured, but to my own home with Sophia, a home health nurse with 20 years of cardiac care experience. The foundation was covering her salary, though Jenny didn't know that. As far as she was concerned, I had splurged irresponsibly on private care. Mom, this is crazy, Jenny argued during her first visit to my home after my discharge. You can't afford this level of care. What happens when your savings run out? I was seated in my favorite armchair by the living room window, a far cry from the frail invalid Jenny seemed to expect. Sophia had helped me dress in real clothes rather than pajamas, and I'd even managed to apply some lipstick before Jenny's arrival. My finances are not your concern, I replied calmly. I've made arrangements. Jenny paced the living room, her designer boots clicking on the hardwood floors. What arrangements? Taking out a second mortgage on this house? Draining your retirement account? Neither, I said. Jenny, sit down, please. She reluctantly perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture radiating tension. I know you're worried about me, I began, choosing my words carefully. And I appreciate that you want to help. But calling me a burden in my hospital room was cruel and unfounded. Jenny had the grace to look embarrassed. I didn't mean it like that. I was stressed. You have to understand, this came out of nowhere for us. Heart disease doesn't usually send advance notice, I replied dryly. But my point is that I am not a burden, financially or otherwise. I have resources you don't know about. And I've made arrangements for my care during recovery and beyond. What resources? Jenny asked skeptically. Your nurse's pension? I considered telling her everything then. About the patient safety protocol, the licensing agreements, the foundation. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the entitled tone in her voice, or the way she had immediately assumed I was destitute without her help. That's not important right now, I said instead. What matters is that I need you to respect my decisions about my own care and living arrangements. I'm not selling my house, I'm not moving to assisted living, and I'm certainly not asking you to support me financially. Jenny's expression hardened. Fine. But when this private nurse depletes your savings and you can't afford your mortgage anymore, don't come crying to us. The old me, the pre-surgery me, would have soothed her hurt feelings, perhaps even apologized for being direct. But something had changed during those days in the hospital. Perhaps it was confronting my own mortality, or maybe it was simply reaching the limit of what I was willing to tolerate. Either way, I found myself responding with unexpected firmness. I won't. And in the meantime, I'd appreciate if you'd speak to me with the respect I've earned as your mother. Jenny left shortly after, clearly displeased with the conversation, but unable to argue further without seeming openly disrespectful. As the door closed behind her, Sophia emerged from the kitchen where she had tactfully retreated during our discussion. Family is complicated, she observed, handing me my afternoon medication. That's putting it mildly, I agreed, swallowing the pills with a grimace. She thinks I'm being irresponsible with money I don't have. If she only knew, Sophia smiled. She was one of the few people aware of my role with the foundation, having been vetted and hired through proper channels. She'll find out eventually, I said. But first, I need to focus on getting stronger. And focus I did. The next few weeks established a new rhythm to my life. Mornings were dedicated to physical recovery, cardiac rehabilitation exercises, short walks that gradually increased in distance, nutritionist-approved meals prepared by Sophia. Afternoons, when my energy was highest, I conducted foundation business from my home office, participating in video conferences and reviewing proposals. For the Cardiac Rehabilitation Center, Rachel visited frequently, bringing updates from the hospital and helping with foundation matters that required in-person attention. Dr. Bennett stopped by weekly, initially to check on my recovery, but increasingly to discuss the plans for the cardiac center that would bear my name. Jenny's visits, by contrast, grew less frequent and more strained. She seemed uncomfortable with my increasing independence, and visibly startled when she once arrived to find me in a video conference with the foundation board. She asked no questions about it, however, apparently assuming it was some sort of support group for cardiac patients. Mark didn't visit at all, claiming work obligations, though Rachel informed me that she had seen him golfing at the country club on multiple occasions. Tyler, my 12-year-old grandson, was the only bright spot in my relationship with Jenny's family, calling frequently and even convincing his mother to drop him off for weekend visits. "Grandma, is it true you might move to that old people place near our house?" he asked during one such visit, 3 months into my recovery. We were playing chess in the sunroom, a game I had taught him when he was 8. Tyler was getting quite good, though I suspected he sometimes let me win out, of kindness. "No, sweetheart," I assured him. "I'm staying right here in my own home." He visibly relaxed. "Good. Mom keeps saying you can't manage by yourself, but you seem fine to me." "I'm getting stronger every day," I confirmed, moving my knight to capture his pawn. "And I have help when I need it." Tyler nodded, studying the chessboard with intense concentration. "Mom and Dad fight about you sometimes," he said casually, not looking up. "Dad says they can't afford to help you with money stuff, but Mom says they have to because you're family." My heart ached at the thought of Tyler overhearing such arguments. "You shouldn't worry about any of that," I told him gently. "The grown-ups will figure it out." "But are you okay for money?" he persisted, blue eyes suddenly meeting mine with surprising maturity. Because I have birthday money saved up. You can have it if you need it. The lump in my throat made it difficult to speak. This child, this wonderful, compassionate child, was offering me his birthday savings while his parents discussed me as a financial liability. That's incredibly sweet, I managed finally. But I promise you, I don't need money. In fact, I hesitated, then made a decision. Can you keep a secret? Just between us? Tyler nodded solemnly, leaning forward. I'm actually doing something very important with the hospital, I told him. Something that's going to help a lot of people. In 6 months, there's going to be a special ceremony, and I'd really like you to be there. What kind of ceremony? He asked, intrigued. They're naming a new part of the hospital after me, I explained, for all my years of work there. Tyler's eyes widened. Like your actual name? On the building? On part of it, yes. That's so cool, he exclaimed. Can I tell Mom and Dad? I shook my head. Not yet. I want to surprise them. Can you keep the secret until then? He nodded, clearly thrilled to be entrusted with such important information. I promise. But can I ask one thing? Of course. When they put your name on the building, can I be there to see it? Front row, I promised, right beside me. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Jenny, earlier than expected to pick up Tyler. She entered the sunroom with the brisk efficiency that characterized all her movements these days. Ready to go, Ty? We have the Petersons' dinner party tonight. Tyler looked at me with obvious reluctance. Can I stay longer? We're in the middle of a game. Jenny glanced at the chessboard with barely concealed impatience. Not today. Mrs. Henderson is watching you while we're out, and she's already at the house. Bob Henderson, Jenny's godfather and one of my oldest friends. I hadn't seen him since before my surgery. How is Bob? I asked, genuinely curious. I've been meaning to call him. Jenny shrugged. Fine, I guess. Busy with his foundation work. She checked her watch. Tyler, go get your backpack. We need to go. As Tyler reluctantly packed up his things, I considered how casually Jenny had mentioned Bob's foundation work. The Henderson Foundation was well known in Riverside, focusing on educational initiatives for underprivileged children. Jenny had always been proud of her connection to Bob and his philanthropic efforts. Yet she couldn't imagine her own mother might be involved in similar work. In Jenny's mind, I was simply Nurse Ellen, reliable, practical, and now, unfortunately, a potential burden. Tyler hugged me tightly before leaving. Remember our secret, he whispered. I winked at him. 6 months. After they left, I sat alone in the sunroom, contemplating the half-finished chess game. 6 months had initially seemed like an impossibly long recovery period. Now, 3 months in, I realized it had given me something unexpected. Time to reflect, to plan, and to understand what truly mattered in my life. The foundation work had always been separate from my identity as nurse, mother, and grandmother. But perhaps it was time to integrate these aspects of my life, to let my family see the full measure of what I had accomplished while they weren't paying attention. The Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center would be more than just a name on a building. It would be a statement. I was not a burden. I was not finished. And I was certainly not defined solely by my relationship to my daughter and her financial concerns. With newfound resolve, I picked up my phone and called Bob Henderson. It was time to bring more allies into my plan. Bob Henderson arrived at my house the following afternoon, bringing homemade lasagna and the warm, dependable presence I'd missed during my recovery. At 70, Bob had the energy of a man 20 years younger, a retired high school principal who now dedicated his life to educational philanthropy through the foundation he'd established after his wife's death. Ellen Thompson, he greeted me with a gentle hug, mindful of my healing chest. You're looking far better than Jenny led me to believe. I laughed as I led him into the kitchen. Did she have me at death's door? Close to it, he admitted, placing the lasagna on the counter. According to Jenny, you're one missed medication away from disaster and financially destitute to boot. And you believed her? I raised an eyebrow as I fetched plates from the cabinet. A small act of normalcy that would have been impossible a month ago. Not for a second, Bob grinned. I've known you too long, Ellen. You've always been the most capable person in any, As we settled at the kitchen table with generous portions of lasagna, I explained the situation with Jenny and Mark, including their reaction to my surgery and the burden comment that still stung when I thought about it. Bob listened attentively, his weathered face concerned. Jenny's always had a blind spot when it comes to you, he said finally. She sees what she expects to see. Her practical, hard-working mother who put everyone else first. And now that I need some help, she assumes I'm helpless, I added. Exactly. Bob nodded. She has no frame of reference for you as anything other than the self-sufficient nurse who raised her single-handedly. I twirled pasta around my fork, considering his words. Rachel suggested I should have told her about the foundation years ago. Perhaps, Bob acknowledged. But I understand why you didn't. The foundation was yours, something separate from your identity as Jenny's mother. We all need parts of ourselves that aren't defined by our relationships to others. The understanding in his eyes warmed me, more than the lasagna. Unlike Jenny, Bob had always seen me as a whole person, with dreams and ambitions beyond motherhood and nursing. Dr. Bennett told me they're naming the new cardiac center after you, he continued. That's quite an honor. It feels surreal, I admitted. All those years I just did my job. I never expected recognition like this. You did more than your job, Bob corrected gently. You revolutionized patient safety protocols, established a foundation that's improving healthcare access across the region, and mentored countless young nurses. You deserve this recognition and more. I felt my cheeks warm at his praise. I told Tyler about the naming ceremony, made him promise to keep it a secret from Jenny until I'm ready to tell her. Bob chuckled. Smart move. Nothing motivates a 12-year-old like being entrusted with an important secret. He paused, studying me. But why keep it from Jenny? Why not let her see this achievement? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself for weeks. I'm not entirely sure, I confessed. Part of me wants to wait until the ceremony, to see the look on her face when she realizes her burden of a mother is having a hospital wing named after her. A touch of vindication? Bob suggested mildly. Maybe, I acknowledged. But it's more than that. I think I needed time to process everything. The surgery, retirement, Jenny's reaction. I needed to decide who I want to be in this next chapter, before announcing it to the world. And have you decided? I thought about the foundation board meetings I'd been conducting from my home office, the plans for the cardiac rehabilitation center, the nursing scholarship program we were expanding. I think so, I said slowly. I want to step fully into my role as executive director of the foundation. I want to use everything I've learned in 32 years of nursing to improve patient care on a broader scale. And yes, I added with a small smile, I want my daughter to see me as someone worthy of respect, not just obligation. Bob reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She will. Jenny's not heartless, just limited in her perspective. When she sees the complete picture of who you are, she'll adjust her vision. I hope you're right, I sighed. In the meantime, I could use your help with something. Name it. The foundation is hosting a fundraising gala for the Cardiac Rehabilitation Center next month. Nothing extravagant, a small dinner at Riverside Country Club. I'd like you to help me convince Jenny and Mark to attend without revealing why it's so important. Bob's eyes twinkled. A little subterfuge between friends? I'm in. The following weeks brought steady improvement in my physical condition. By month 4 of my recovery, I was walking 2 miles daily, managing household tasks with minimal assistance, and working regular hours from my home office. Sophia had reduced her time to mornings only, helping with exercises and monitoring my medications. The approaching foundation gala occupied much of my attention. As my first public appearance since the surgery, it represented not just a fundraising opportunity, but a personal milestone. The event would bring together hospital administrators, potential donors, and foundation board members, people who knew me as Executive Director Ellen Thompson rather than Nurse Ellen or Jenny's mother. Rachel helped me shop for an appropriate dress, a deep blue sheath that disguised the still visible surgical scars while flattering my slowly returning figure. "You look powerful," she declared as I emerged from the fitting room. "Like someone who has a hospital wing named after her." I examined my reflection critically. The woman in the mirror looked different from the head nurse who had roamed Riverside's corridors for decades. Perhaps it was the dress, or maybe the subtle makeup Rachel had insisted upon. But I suspected the real change was internal, a shift in how I perceived myself. "I think I'll take it," I decided. "And maybe those silver earrings, too." Rachel grinned. "Now you're getting into the spirit. Has Bob convinced Jenny and Mark to attend yet?" "He's working on it," I replied. "He invited them to join his table, told them it's an important charity event." Jenny seemed suspicious, but Mark can never resist networking opportunities. The plan worked better than anticipated. 3 days before the gala, Jenny called to inform me that she and Mark would be attending some hospital fundraiser with Bob. "It's for cardiac care," she added. "Made me think of you." "That's nice," I replied neutrally, suppressing a smile. "I'm sure it will be an interesting evening." "I doubt it," Jenny sighed. "These charity things are always boring, but Mark says the Wilsons will be there and he's been trying to get their business for months." I bit back a comment about her dismissive attitude toward charity events. "Well, I hope you enjoy it anyway. Will Tyler be staying with a friend?" "No, he has a debate tournament. Mrs. Peterson is dropping him at our house afterward." She paused. "How are you feeling, by the way? We haven't talked much lately." The question seemed genuine, if belated. "Much better," I told her truthfully. "Nearly back to normal." "Good," she said, sounding relieved. "Listen, Mom, about what I said in the hospital." "It's fine, Jenny," I interrupted, not ready for an apology that might seem forced. "We were all under stress." "Still," she persisted, "calling you a burden was, well, it wasn't right." It was as close to an apology as Jenny typically managed. "Thank you for saying that," I acknowledged. "We can talk more soon." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, uncertain how to feel. Jenny's half apology suggested she regretted her words. But did she regret the attitude behind them? Did she still see me as a financial liability? Just one she shouldn't have labeled so bluntly? The night of the gala arrived with perfect April weather, warm enough for the country club to open the terrace for pre-dinner cocktails. I arrived early with Rachel, wanting to review final details with the event coordinator. The ballroom looked elegant with its blue and silver decorations, tables arranged around a small stage where I would later present the plans for the Cardiac Rehabilitation Center. "Nervous?" Rachel asked as we inspected the donor recognition displays. "A little," I admitted. "It's been a while since I've spoken to a crowd this size." "You'll be wonderful," she assured me. "Just remember, everyone in that room already respects you. Half of them owe their jobs to your mentorship." As the first guests began to arrive, I positioned myself near the entrance with Dr. Bennett and several board members. Rachel slipped away to coordinate with the audiovisual team for my presentation. The ballroom filled steadily with familiar faces: hospital colleagues, community leaders, foundation supporters. I greeted each one warmly, accepting their congratulations on my recovery and their enthusiasm for the Cardiac Center project. I was deep in conversation with the hospital's chief of cardiology when Rachel appeared at my elbow, her expression a mixture of amusement and warning. "Bob just arrived," she murmured, "with guests." I turned toward the entrance to see Bob Henderson guiding Jenny and Mark into the ballroom. Jenny looked stunning in a burgundy cocktail dress, her blonde hair swept up elegantly. Mark, ever the businessman, wore his networking smile as he scanned the room for important connections. Neither of them had noticed me yet. "Shall I intercept them?" Rachel offered. "Give you time to prepare?" I shook my head. "No, I've been preparing for 4 months. Let's see how this plays out." Bob caught my eye across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod before steering Jenny and Mark toward the bar, deliberately facing them away from where I stood. The small deception would give me time to position myself advantageously. "If you'll excuse me," I said to the chief of cardiology, "I should greet some of our newer guests." I made my way toward the center of the room, where I would be visible when Jenny eventually turned around. Dr. Bennett, sensing the impending drama, moved to stand supportively beside me. It was Bob who engineered the reveal, deftly maneuvering Jenny and Mark through the crowd until they stood directly in front of me, champagne flutes in hand. "Ellen!" Bob exclaimed with feigned surprise. "I didn't expect to see you here. You remember my goddaughter Jenny and her husband Mark?" Jenny froze, champagne halfway to her lips. Mark blinked rapidly, confusion evident in his expression. "Mom?" Jenny managed finally. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, enjoying, perhaps a bit too much, her obvious bewilderment. "The same as everyone else, supporting a cause I believe in." Mark looked between Bob and me, comprehension slowly dawning. "You two planned this," he accused, "getting us here without telling us Ellen would be attending." "Not exactly," Bob replied mildly. "I merely invited you to an important charity event, which it absolutely is." Before Mark could respond, Dr. Bennett stepped forward, extending his hand. "You must be Ellen's daughter. I'm Michael Bennett, Chief Administrator at Riverside. Your mother is one of our most valued colleagues." Jenny shook his hand automatically, still processing the situation. "Nice to meet you. I didn't realize. Mom would be well enough to attend something like this." "Oh, Ellen is doing remarkably well," Dr. Bennett assured her. "We couldn't have organized this event without her leadership." Jenny's brow furrowed. "Her leadership?" "As executive director of the Central City Medical Foundation," he clarified, as if this were common knowledge. "The foundation is the primary funder for our new cardiac center." I watched as Jenny's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. Mark, ever attuned to financial implications, suddenly focused his full attention on the conversation. "Executive director?" Jenny repeated. "Of a foundation?" Dr. Bennett glanced at me, realizing he might have overstepped. "I assumed you knew about your mother's role." "It never came up," I explained smoothly. "Jenny and I tend to keep our professional and personal lives separate." Mark, recovering more quickly than Jenny, extended his hand to Dr. Bennett. "Mark Carter, I'm in commercial. Real estate development. Perhaps we could discuss the hospital's future expansion plans sometime?" As Mark launched into networking mode, Jenny pulled me slightly aside, her voice low and urgent. "What is going on, Mom? What foundation? What are they talking about?" "It's a long story," I told her. "One I probably should have shared years ago." "You think?" Her tone was sharp, but I detected hurt beneath the anger. "Why would you keep something like this secret?" Before I could respond, the event coordinator appeared at my elbow. "Ms. Thompson, we're ready for you whenever you'd like to begin the presentation." Jenny's eyes widened. "Presentation? You're speaking?" "I'm introducing the Cardiac Rehabilitation Center project," I explained. "Why don't we talk after?" Leaving Jenny speechless for perhaps the first time in her adult life, I followed the coordinator to the small stage. Rachel handed me note cards I wouldn't need. After months of preparation, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. The room quieted as Dr. Bennett introduced me, listing accomplishments I'd never sought recognition for. The patient safety protocol now used in hospitals across 12 states, the nursing education initiatives funded by the foundation, the lives saved through programs I'd helped implement. As I took the podium, I found Jenny in the crowd. She sat rigidly beside Mark at Bob's table, her expression unreadable. Behind her, Rachel gave me an encouraging thumbs up. "Thank you, Dr. Bennett, for that generous introduction," I began. "And thank you all for supporting the Central City Medical Foundation's newest initiative, the Cardiac Rehabilitation Center at Riverside Community Hospital." For the next 15 minutes, I outlined the project that had consumed much of my recovery period, a state-of-the-art facility that would provide comprehensive support for cardiac patients through physical rehabilitation, nutritional counseling, psychological services, and family education. As someone who recently experienced cardiac surgery firsthand, I continued, I understand the fear and uncertainty patients face. The physical recovery is challenging enough, but the emotional impact on both patients and their families can be equally daunting. I glanced again at Jenny, whose rigid posture had softened slightly. Was she finally seeing me as something more than just her practical, self-sufficient mother? Or was she simply processing the public revelation that I wasn't who she thought I was? The Cardiac Rehabilitation Center will address these challenges holistically, I explained. Patients will receive individualized care plans that consider not just their medical needs, but their personal circumstances, support systems, and long-term goals. As I concluded my presentation and the room erupted in applause, I felt a weight lifting, the burden not of my health condition or financial situation, but of the incomplete narrative I had allowed to define me in my daughter's eyes. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations about the project. Jenny and Mark remained at Bob's table, watching from a distance as I moved through the crowd. Several times I caught Jenny studying me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, somewhere between confusion and reassessment. It was nearly midnight when the last guests departed, and only the foundation staff, including Rachel, remained to oversee cleanup. I was gathering my things. When Jenny approached alone, Mark having stepped outside to bring the car around. "So," she said, arms crossed defensively, "were you ever going to tell me about all this? Or was I supposed to go on thinking you were just a nurse with a pension plan and a modest house?" The accusatory tone triggered a flash of irritation. "Would it have mattered, Jenny? When have you ever shown interest in my work beyond how it inconvenienced your schedule?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I sighed, suddenly exhausted. "When was the last time you asked about my day? About my patients? About anything related to my life beyond how it intersected with yours?" Jenny opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again, looking troubled. "I guess I assumed I knew everything important," she admitted finally. "You were mom, reliable, practical, always there when we needed you." "I am all those things," I acknowledged, "but I'm also this." I gestured around the ballroom with its foundation banners and project displays. "I've been building something meaningful, something that will outlast me." Jenny was quiet for a moment, absorbing my words. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "About the foundation, about all of it?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for months, and suddenly the answer seemed clear. "Because I needed something that was just mine," I said simply. "Something that wasn't defined by being your mother or anyone's nurse. Something I built with my own hands from the ground up." Jenny nodded slowly, understanding flickering in her eyes. "I get that. Like my business. I started it because I needed something that was mine, not just Mark's wife, or Tyler's mother. The parallel seemed to soften something in her expression. For perhaps the first time, she was seeing me not just as her mother, but as a woman with her own ambitions and accomplishments. "There's more," I said, deciding to reveal everything at once. "They're naming the new cardiac wing after me. The Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center. The ceremony is in 2 months." Jenny's eyes widened. "They're putting your name on the hospital? The actual building?" "Just the cardiac wing," I clarified. "But yes." She shook her head in disbelief. "My God, Mom. All these years I thought I was the successful one in the family." The comment might have stung once, but now I simply smiled. "Success takes many forms, Jenny. Your clothing line is thriving, and you've built a beautiful life for Tyler. I'm proud of you for that." Rachel approached, hesitant to interrupt. "Ellen, the cars are ready whenever you are. Do you need me to drive you home?" "I'm fine to drive," I assured her. "I'll take her," Jenny interjected, surprising us both. "If that's okay with you, Mom?" It was the first time she'd offered any help without being asked since my surgery. "That would be nice," I accepted. "Thank you." The drive to my house was quiet, both of us processing the evening's revelations. As we turned onto my street, Jenny finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry I called you a burden," she said, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I was scared about your surgery, worried about what would happen if you couldn't take care of yourself, but that's no excuse." "Thank you," I said simply. "And I'm sorry I never asked about your work," she continued. I should have paid more attention. I studied my daughter's profile, illuminated by the dashboard lights. Despite our differences, despite the distance that had grown between us, she was still the little girl who had once looked at me with complete trust and adoration. "It's not too late to start," I offered gently. Jenny nodded, pulling into my driveway. "I'd like that." She turned off the engine, but made no move to exit the car. "So, this cardiac center with your name on it, is that why you've been so insistent about staying in your house? Because you knew you didn't need our financial help?" "Partly," I acknowledged, "but mostly because this is my home, and I'm not ready to leave it. My independence matters to me, Jenny. Surely you can understand that." "I do," she admitted. "More than I realized." As we walked to my front door, Jenny hesitated, then asked, "Would it be okay if Tyler and I came for dinner this weekend? He's been asking about you and I'd like to hear more about the foundation, if you're willing to share." The olive branch was tentative but genuine. "I'd like that very much," I replied, unlocking my door. "And Jenny? Bring Mark too if he wants to come. It's time we all got to know each other better." She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Good night, Mom." "Good night, Jenny." As I watched her drive away, I felt a curious mixture of emotions. Relief that the truth was finally out, cautious hope for a new understanding between us, and pride in how far I'd come since that painful day in the hospital when my daughter had called me a burden. The Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center would be ready for its naming ceremony in just 2 months. By then, perhaps Jenny would be ready to stand beside me, not out of obligation, but genuine respect. And if not, I would stand proudly anyway, surrounded by colleagues who valued my contributions and friends who had seen my worth all along. Either way, I was no one's burden. I was Ellen Thompson, nurse, foundation director, soon-to-be namesake of a hospital wing, and a woman who had finally discovered that recovering from heart surgery meant healing more than just the physical heart. The weekend dinner with Jenny, Mark, and Tyler materialized with surprising ease. I spent Saturday morning preparing my mother's famous pot roast, a recipe I hadn't attempted since before my surgery. The familiar routine of chopping vegetables and searing meat felt therapeutic, a physical confirmation of my returning strength. Sophia had officially ended her full-time care the previous week, now visiting only twice weekly to monitor my medication and exercise regimen. The house felt both emptier and more completely mine again, a sanctuary where I was rediscovering independence. As I set the dining room table with my grandmother's china, something I normally reserved for holidays, I found myself humming, an unconscious expression of optimism I hadn't felt in months. The doorbell rang precisely at 6, and I opened it to find all 3 Carters on my doorstep. Tyler immediately wrapped me in a careful hug. "Grandma, Dad says you're going to have your name on the hospital like those rich people who donate millions of dollars." I laughed, ruffling his sandy hair. "Not quite like that, but yes, they're naming the cardiac wing after me." Mark stepped forward, with an uncharacteristically humble expression and a bouquet of lilies. "These are for you, Ellen. Congratulations on the foundation and the cardiac center." "Thank you, Mark." I accepted the flowers, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Please, come in." Jenny followed, carrying a bakery box. "I brought dessert. That chocolate cake you like from Bellini's." The thoughtfulness surprised me. Bellini's was across town from their Meadowbrook neighborhood, and Jenny must have made a special trip to get my favorite cake. "That was very kind of you," I said, leading them into the living room. "Dinner's almost ready." As we settled into conversation, I noted subtle shifts in their behavior. Mark asked specific questions about the foundation rather than immediately steering the discussion toward his business connections. Jenny seemed less preoccupied with her phone, actually putting it away after silencing the ringer. And Tyler, bless him, proudly announced to his parents that he'd known about the cardiac center naming for weeks, but had kept Grandma's secret perfectly. "You told Tyler before us?" Jenny asked, but her tone held curiosity rather than accusation. "He visited more regularly," I explained simply, "and children often see us more clearly than adults do." Jenny had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Fair point. During dinner, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. I shared stories about the foundation's beginnings, how Dr. Bennett had encouraged me to patent my patient safety protocol, how the first licensing agreement had seemed like an unbelievable stroke of luck, how Rachel had helped me establish the foundation's structure. "So all those years you were working as a nurse and running a foundation?" Jenny asked, clearly still processing this revelation. "How did you manage both?" "The same way you manage your clothing line and motherhood," I pointed out. "You compartmentalize, prioritize, and occasionally sacrifice sleep." She nodded slowly, recognition dawning in her eyes. "I never thought about it that way. I always assumed your nursing job was simpler somehow, less demanding than what I do." "It was different," I acknowledged, "but not simpler. Liv's depended on my attention to detail, my ability to anticipate problems before they became crises. The foundation work required different skills, but the same core principle, seeing beyond the immediate situation to the broader impact." Mark, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "What's the foundation's annual operating budget?" The businessman in him couldn't resist the financial question. I named a figure that made him choke slightly on his pot roast. "That's more than most mid-sized corporations," he managed after recovering. "And you've been managing this while working full-time?" "With an excellent board and dedicated staff," I clarified. "But yes, essentially." "And now that you're retiring from nursing?" Jenny asked. "Now I'll be stepping into the executive director role full-time. The Cardiac Rehabilitation Center is just the beginning of what we hope to accomplish." Tyler, who had been listening intently, beamed with unexpected pride. "My grandma is basically a CEO," he announced to no one in particular. "That's way cooler than being just a nurse." "Being just a nurse saved countless lives," I gently corrected him. "Never underestimate the value of direct patient care, Tyler. The foundation's work matters, but so does every individual act of healing." He considered this seriously, then nodded. "So you're like double important." a life-saving nurse, and a foundation director. I suppose that's one way to look at it, I laughed. As we moved to the living room for coffee and Bellini's chocolate cake, Jenny helped me carry dishes to the kitchen. When Mark and Tyler became engrossed in a discussion about Tyler's upcoming debate tournament, she spoke quietly. Why didn't you tell me about the foundation when they first approached you about the patent? That was, 12 years ago? I considered the question carefully as I sliced the cake. Honestly, at first, it was because I wasn't sure it would amount to anything significant. By the time it became clear that it would, we were already in a pattern of not discussing my work in any depth. And that's my fault, Jenny concluded. It's not about fault, I corrected. We both contributed to the distance that grew between us. I could have shared more, insisted you see this part of my life. But I got comfortable with the separation, my personal life as your mother and Tyler's grandmother, my professional life as nurse and foundation director. Jenny was quiet for a moment, arranging cake slices on dessert plates. When did it start feeling like I didn't respect what you did? The directness of her question caught me off guard. I'm not sure there was a specific moment, I replied honestly. But over time, the cumulative effect of small comments, assumptions about my finances, references to my job as if it were a simple occupation rather than a calling, it created an impression that you saw my work as less valuable than yours or Mark's. She nodded, accepting this without defensiveness. I think I did. Not consciously, but I took your stability for granted. In my mind, you were Mom, the constant who would always be there, unchanging and uncomplicated. We all do that with our parents to some extent, I acknowledged. We freeze them in the roles they played when we were growing up. But that's not fair to you, Jenny insisted. You're more than just my mother. The recognition, so simple yet so profound, felt like a breakthrough. Thank you for seeing that, I said softly. When we returned to the living room with dessert, the conversation shifted to the upcoming naming ceremony. Mark, ever practical, asked about the guest list and media coverage. Jenny offered to help with any preparations, and Tyler wanted to know if he could invite his debate team coach, who says medicine is the most important job anyone can have. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically things had changed since my surgery. The crisis that had seemed like an ending to my career, my independence, perhaps even my relationship with my daughter, had instead become a catalyst for new beginnings. Mom, Jenny said as they prepared to leave, we'd like you to come for dinner next weekend at our house. There's something we want to discuss with you. The invitation, while welcome, triggered a flicker of apprehension. Something wrong? No, she assured me quickly. Actually, it's something positive, but we'd rather talk about it in person. I agreed, curious about what this something positive might be. After they left, I sat in my quiet living room, replaying the evening's conversations. The shift in Jenny and Mark's attitude seemed genuine, respectful without being overly deferential, interested without being intrusive. Whatever had prompted this change, I was grateful for it. The following week brought a flurry of activity related to the cardiac center. Construction had reached the interior finishes phase, and Dr. Bennett invited me to tour the facility with the project architect. Walking through the half-completed spaces, patient rooms designed with recovery in mind, consultation areas where families could meet with care teams, therapy spaces equipped with state-of-the-art rehabilitation equipment, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. What do you think? Dr. Bennett asked as we stood in what would become the center's main atrium. It's even better than the renderings, I told him honestly. I can already envision patients healing here. He smiled, gesturing toward the entrance where workers were preparing the area that would eventually hold the dedication plaque. 6 weeks until your name goes up there. Having any second thoughts? About the naming? No. I shook my head. But I am thinking about the speech I'll need to give at the ceremony. It feels significant, more personal than the Foundation Gala presentation. Because it represents your life's work, he suggested, both as a nurse and as a foundation director. Exactly. I nodded, relieved that he understood. It's not just about what I've accomplished, but about all the people who made it possible. Colleagues, mentors, patients who taught me what courage really means. And family? He prompted gently. I thought about Jenny's recent change in attitude, the tentative rebuilding of our relationship. Yes, family too, in ways I'm still coming to understand. Later that week, I visited the foundation offices in person for the first time since my surgery. The modest suite in a professional building near the hospital had been my second home for years, though I'd typically visited after hospital shifts or on weekends. Rachel had arranged a small welcome-back gathering. Nothing elaborate, just coffee, and pastries with the staff of 5 who managed the foundation's daily operations. Their genuine delight at seeing me back at my desk was touching. "The place hasn't been the same without you," commented Diane, our grants administrator. "Video conferences are efficient, but not the same as having you here in person." "It's good to be back," I assured her, "even if it's just a few hours today." After the informal reception, Rachel and I retreated to my office to review progress on current initiatives. The Cardiac Rehabilitation Center dominated our agenda, but there were other projects requiring attention. The nursing scholarship program entering its 10th year, a community health education initiative targeting underserved neighborhoods, a research grant focused on preventative cardiac care. "You've built something remarkable here, Ellen," Rachel observed as we worked through financial projections. "Most people don't get to see their life's work take physical form like you will with the Cardiac Center." "I've been fortunate," I acknowledged, though it wasn't always smooth sailing. "Remember the first board meeting when I presented the scholarship program? I thought they'd laugh me out of the room." Rachel chuckled. "Instead, they doubled your proposed budget. You've always had a gift for making people see possibilities they hadn't considered. A necessary skill when you're a nurse advocating for patients in a system not designed to prioritize their needs," I pointed out. A comfortable silence fell between us as we continued working. After a while, Rachel spoke again, her tone more hesitant. "Have you thought about what comes after the naming ceremony? About your future with the foundation?" The question touched on something I'd been considering since the gala. "I have, actually. I think it might be time to consider restructuring my role. Perhaps less day-to-day management and more strategic direction." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Are you considering stepping back?" "Not stepping back," I clarified. "Stepping up. Focusing on expanding our impact rather than managing operations. The foundation has grown beyond what one person can effectively oversee, especially as we take on projects like the Cardiac Center." "That makes sense," Rachel nodded. "And it would give you more flexibility for personal time." "Exactly," I agreed. "My recovery has made me reconsider certain priorities. I want to continue the foundation's work, but I also want time for myself. Maybe even that trip to the Grand Canyon I've been postponing for 20 years. The conversation with Rachel stayed with me as I drove to Jenny's house that weekend for dinner. The idea of restructuring my role at the foundation felt right, a natural evolution rather than a compromise. Perhaps this was what healthy aging looked like. Not clinging desperately to past identities, but thoughtfully shaping new ones that honored both accumulated wisdom and changing circumstances. The Carters' Meadowbrook home looked different somehow as I pulled into their circular driveway. The imposing facade that had once seemed like a statement of their success now struck me as slightly excessive. Beautiful, but requiring constant maintenance that couldn't possibly bring commensurate joy. Jenny greeted me with unexpected warmth, ushering me into their formal living room where Mark and Tyler waited. The room felt less sterile than I remembered, with family photos now displayed alongside the carefully curated art pieces. "You look well," Jenny observed, taking my coat. "The color's back in your cheeks." "I feel well," I confirmed, nearly back to full strength. Tyler insisted on showing me his latest debate trophy before dinner, proudly explaining the argument that had won his team the regional championship. His enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself genuinely engaged in his explanation of competitive debate structures and strategy. Over dinner, catered Italian food that Jenny had thoughtfully transferred to serving dishes, the conversation remained pleasant if somewhat guarded. I sensed they were building toward something but couldn't guess what it might be. Finally, as we finished the main course, Mark cleared his throat. "Ellen, we wanted to talk to you about something important. A decision we've been considering for a while, but that your recent revelations have helped clarify." I set down my fork, preparing myself for whatever might come next. "I'm listening." Jenny and Mark exchanged glances before she continued. "We've decided to sell this house. It's too big for our needs, requires constant upkeep, and frankly, the mortgage is larger than makes sense for our actual income." The announcement surprised me. The Meadowbrook house had been their pride and joy, the physical manifestation of their success. "I see," I said carefully. "Have you found another place?" "That's the second part," Mark replied. "We're not just downsizing. We're relocating. I've been offered a position with a development firm in Pine Ridge." Pine Ridge, a community just 10 minutes from my home, modestly upscale but nowhere near as pretentious as Meadowbrook. "It's a lateral move financially," Mark continued, "but the company's values align better with what I want to focus on at this stage in my career. They specialize in sustainable development, including affordable housing initiatives." The shift seemed dramatic for Mark, who had previously focused exclusively on luxury real estate. "What prompted this change?" I asked, genuinely curious. Mark hesitated, then answered with unexpected candor. "Seeing what you've built with the foundation, creating something of lasting value rather than just chasing the next commission. It made me reconsider my priorities." "And the commute from Meadowbrook to Pine Ridge is brutal," Jenny added pragmatically. "Plus, living closer to you would make regular visits easier, especially as you continue your recovery." The thoughtfulness behind their decision touched me deeply. "That sounds like a well-considered plan," I said. "How does Tyler feel about changing schools?" "I get to join the city debate team," Tyler announced enthusiastically. "They went to nationals last year." Jenny smiled at her son's excitement. "The schools in Pine Ridge are excellent. Smaller class sizes, stronger academic programs. And without the private school tuition, we can start building Tyler's college fund properly." The practical financial considerations revealed a shift in their thinking that seemed both healthy and long overdue. "There's one more thing," Mark added. "The move would free up capital that we've been discussing putting to better use." "What kind of use?" I asked, curious about this unexpected turn in the conversation. Jenny reached for a folder on the sideboard and placed it in front of me. "We'd like to establish a scholarship fund through your foundation for nursing students who commit to working in underserved communities after graduation." I opened the folder to find a detailed proposal, thoroughly researched and professionally presented, for a substantial endowment that would fund 2 nursing scholarships annually in perpetuity. I struggled to find words. "This is incredibly generous." "It's not entirely selfless," Jenny admitted. "There are tax benefits to establishing the endowment. But more importantly, we want to honor your work in a meaningful way. A way that extends your impact beyond your personal involvement with the foundation." The gesture represented more than financial support for nursing education. It was an acknowledgement of the value of my life's work, a tangible statement that my daughter and son-in-law respected what I had built. "The scholarship would be named after you," Mark explained. the Ellen Thompson Nursing Scholars Program. We thought about waiting to announce it at the naming ceremony, Jenny added, but wanted to discuss it with you first, make sure it aligns with the Foundation's mission. It aligns perfectly, I assured them, still processing the magnitude of their proposal. The Nursing Scholarship Program has been one of our core initiatives from the beginning. Tyler, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Can I tell her about the other thing now? Jenny smiled indulgently. Go ahead. Tyler straightened in his chair, assuming what I recognized as his debate posture. I've decided I want to be a doctor, he announced solemnly. A cardiologist, specifically, so I can work in your cardiac center someday. The declaration, so earnest, so unexpected, brought tears to my eyes. That's a wonderful ambition, Tyler. Though you should know it requires many years of very difficult study. I know, he nodded seriously. I've researched it. 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of internal medicine, residency, and 3 more years of cardiology fellowship. That's 14 years of training after high school. His detailed knowledge of the path ahead impressed me. That's exactly right. What made you interested in medicine? You did, he said simply. Not just the foundation stuff, but the nursing, too. When you were in the hospital, I talked to your nurses. They said you were the best teacher they ever had, that you always made time to explain things to patients so they weren't scared. I want to be like that. The simple honesty of his answer touched something deep within me. While I'd been worrying about Jenny's respect for my career, my grandson had been quietly absorbing lessons about service and compassion. That's very moving, Tyler, I said softly. Whatever path you eventually choose, that desire to help others will serve you well. As the evening continued, conversation flowed more naturally between us all. We discussed the practical aspects of their move to Pine Ridge, the scholarship endowment details, and Tyler's upcoming school projects. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt we were relating to each other as adults with mutual respect, rather than as characters locked in predetermined family roles. When it was time to leave, Jenny walked me to my car. The spring evening was mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of neighbors' flowering cherry trees. Thank you for coming. Tonight, she said, and for being open to our ideas. They're thoughtful ideas, I replied honestly. I'm touched by the scholarship proposal especially. Jenny hesitated, then spoke with unusual vulnerability. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I didn't see you as a whole person, just as my mother. You were right. I never really tried to understand your work or what it meant to you. It's a common blind spot between parents and children, I offered. Maybe, she acknowledged, but it's one I want to correct. I'd like to understand that part of your life better, if you're willing to share it. The request, simple but profound, felt like the closing of a circle that had begun in that hospital room months ago when she'd called me a burden. I'd like that very much, I told her. As I drove home under a canopy of stars, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since my surgery, the cardiac event that had threatened to diminish me, to reduce me to a patient, a burden, a problem to be managed, had instead become a catalyst for transformation. Not just my own, but my family's as well. The Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center would open in just over a month, a physical manifestation of my professional legacy. But perhaps the more meaningful legacy was this: a granddaughter with newfound respect for her mother's work, a grandson inspired to pursue a healing profession, and a daughter finally seeing her mother as a complete human being with dreams and accomplishments of her own. That night, I stood at my bedroom window gazing at the night sky, feeling the steady rhythm of my healed heart. For the first time since my surgery, I felt truly grateful for the crisis that had forced us all to confront uncomfortable truths and find our way to more authentic connections. No longer a burden, no longer just Mom or Nurse Ellen. I was Ellen Thompson, whole and complete, a woman whose name would soon grace a hospital wing not because of wealth or status, but because of a lifetime of meaningful work and the courage to claim her own value. The morning of the naming ceremony dawned with perfect May sunshine, as if nature itself approved of the occasion. I stood before my bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of the navy dress I'd chosen for the event. 6 months had passed since my surgery, exactly as Dr. Bennett had predicted for my recovery. The physical scars had faded to thin silver lines, barely visible beneath my clothing. The emotional wounds had healed as well, transformed into something stronger and more resilient. A car horn sounded outside, and I glanced through the window to see Jenny's new SUV in my driveway. They had completed their move to Pine Ridge, too. Weeks earlier, settling into a charming colonial just 10 minutes from my home. The downsizing had been dramatic, from 4,500 square feet of Meadowbrook opulence to 2,800 square feet of practical comfort. But Jenny had approached it with unexpected enthusiasm, donating furniture to women's shelters and holding a massive garage sale that raised additional funds for the nursing scholarship endowment. I grabbed my purse and speech notes, taking one final glance around the bedroom that had been my sanctuary during the difficult days of early recovery. How different everything looked now, not because the physical space had changed, but because I had. Jenny greeted me with a warm hug as I opened the front door. "Ready for your big day?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, feeling a flutter of nerves despite my preparation. "Is everyone meeting us there?" She nodded, helping me into the passenger seat. Mark and Tyler went ahead to make sure everything's set up properly for the reception. Rachel's coordinating with the catering staff, and Bob promised to handle the media. The casual way she referenced my colleagues and friends reflected our new reality. Jenny had integrated herself into my professional world with surprising ease, attending foundation meetings as an observer and volunteering at hospital fundraisers. The interest seemed genuine, born of a desire to understand rather than merely impress. "Nervous about your speech?" she asked as we drove toward the hospital. "A little," I admitted. It's one thing to present to medical professionals about clinical protocols. It's another to stand before hundreds of people and accept this kind of recognition. Jenny smiled. "Just remember what you told Tyler before his debate championship. Speak from your heart, not just your head." The advice, my own words reflected back to me, calmed my anxiety. "When did you become so wise?" "Must have inherited it from somewhere," she replied with a sideways grin. The hospital campus was transformed for the occasion. A grand white tent stood on the lawn adjacent to the new cardiac wing, chairs arranged in neat rows facing a small stage. Banners bearing the Riverside Community Hospital logo fluttered gently in the spring breeze. A string quartet played softly as early arrivals mingled, accepting champagne flutes from circulating servers. "They certainly didn't spare any expense," I murmured as Jenny found a parking space. "Dr. Bennett insisted on doing this properly," she explained. "He said, and I quote, 'Ellen Thompson gets the full red carpet treatment, or I'll personally fund the difference.'" The thought of the normally reserved Dr. Bennett making such a declaration warmed me. As we approached the tent, I saw familiar faces everywhere. Hospital colleagues, foundation board members, community leaders, and many nurses I had mentored over the decades. They nodded respectfully or waved in greeting, an atmosphere of genuine celebration permeating the gathering. Rachel spotted us immediately, breaking away from a conversation to embrace me. "There she is, woman of the hour." She stepped back, assessing my appearance with a critical eye. "Perfect. You look like exactly what you are, the most influential healthcare leader this community has ever known." "That might be overstating things a bit," I demurred. "Hardly. Rachel scoffed. Just wait until they unveil the donor wall inside. You'll see exactly how many people agree with me. Before I could question her cryptic comment, Dr. Bennett approached, resplendent, in a formal suit rarely seen outside board meetings. "Ellen," he greeted me warmly, "everything is ready whenever you are." The cardiac center staff are assembled in the atrium for the ribbon cutting, and we've arranged for a private tour before opening the facility to general guests. "Thank you, Michael," I said sincerely, "for all of this. It seems excessive for someone who was just doing her job." He shook his head firmly. "What you did was never just a job, and we both know it. Now, shall we begin the proceedings? Your adoring public awaits." With Jenny on one side and Rachel on the other, I followed Dr. Bennett toward the new building. Its modern facade gleamed in the morning sun, large windows reflecting the blue sky and surrounding greenery. The main entrance was cordoned off with a ceremonial ribbon, behind which stood 24 healthcare professionals in crisp white coats, the cardiac rehabilitation team who would soon begin caring for patients in these halls. Dr. Bennett stepped forward, addressing the gathered crowd with practiced ease. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. Today we celebrate not just the opening of a state-of-the-art medical facility, but the legacy of an extraordinary individual whose vision, compassion, and tireless dedication have transformed healthcare in our community." As he continued highlighting my career achievements and the Foundation's work, I found myself studying the faces in the audience. Bob Henderson sat in the front row, beaming with obvious pride. Sophia, my home health nurse, had come with her family. Even some of my former patients had attended, including Harold Jenkins, who had survived a massive heart attack under my care 15 years earlier. And there, near the center, sat Mark and Tyler, both dressed in their Sunday best. Tyler caught my eye and gave an enthusiastic thumbs up while Mark nodded respectfully. Their presence, their obvious support, felt like the completion of a circle that had begun in that hospital room 6 months ago. "And so," Dr. Bennett concluded, "it is my greatest professional honor to dedicate this facility as the Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center, where generations of patients will find healing, hope, and the exceptional care that has been Ellen's hallmark throughout her career." Applause erupted as he gestured for me to join him at the ribbon. Together, we cut the ceremonial barrier, officially opening the center that bore my name. The moment felt surreal. My identity permanently affixed to this place of healing. My life's work crystallized in brick and glass and steel. The private tour revealed spaces even more impressive than I had imagined during construction visits. Patient rooms designed with recovery in mind, family consultation areas that emphasized comfort and privacy, rehabilitation equipment representing the latest advances in cardiac care. Every detail reflected a profound understanding of what patients needed during their most vulnerable moments. But it was the central atrium that took my breath away. A soaring 2-story space filled with natural light, it featured a donor wall unlike anything I had expected. Rather than the traditional listing of financial contributors, this wall displayed photographs, hundreds of them, arranged in a heart pattern around the center's dedication plaque. "What is this?" I asked Dr. Bennett, stepping closer to examine. "The images. Every patient who agreed to be included," he explained quietly. "Every life touched by your protocols, your Foundation's work, your direct care. We've been collecting these photographs for months." I moved along the wall, recognizing faces from throughout my career, children who had grown into adults, elderly patients who had gained precious additional years with their families, cardiac survivors who had rebuilt their lives after devastating diagnoses. "This is..." I struggled to find words adequate to the emotion welling within me. "This is your real legacy," Jenny said softly, appearing at my elbow. "Not the building, not even the Foundation. These people, their lives." The wisdom in her observation, so simple yet so profound, nearly undid my careful composure. These faces represented the true measure of a life's work, each one a reminder that what we do for others outlasts anything we do for ourselves. After the tour concluded, we returned to the tent where guests had gathered for the formal dedication ceremony. I took my place on the stage beside Dr. Bennett, Jenny, Rachel, and key Foundation board members. The audience fell silent as Dr. Bennett approached the podium to begin the proceedings. The ceremony itself passed in something of a blur. Speeches from community leaders, testimonials from former patients, a musical interlude from the hospital's volunteer choir. Finally, Dr. Bennett introduced me for the keynote address. As I stepped to the podium, the notes I had so carefully prepared seemed suddenly inadequate. I looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues who had become friends, patients who had become inspirations, family who had become partners in my vision, and set the papers aside. 32 years ago, I began. I walked through the doors of Riverside Community Hospital for my first shift as a cardiac nurse. I was terrified, convinced I would make some catastrophic mistake that would harm rather than heal. An experienced nurse named Margaret took me aside and told me something I've never forgotten. She said, "Ellen, technical skills can be taught. Compassion is the thing that can't be learned from a textbook." I paused, letting the memory settle around me. Every day since then, I've tried to balance those technical skills with genuine compassion. Sometimes I succeeded, sometimes I failed, but I always tried to see the person beneath the patient, their fears, their hopes, their need to be treated with dignity, even in their most vulnerable moments. My gaze found Tyler in the audience, his young face solemn as he absorbed every word. When I found myself on the other side of the hospital bed 6 months ago, I experienced firsthand what our patients go through. The fear, the uncertainty, the profound gratitude for healthcare providers who saw me as a person, not just a collection of symptoms. I didn't look at Jenny, but I felt her presence on the stage behind me, solid and supportive. That experience changed me. It forced me to reconsider priorities, to acknowledge vulnerabilities, to accept help when I needed it, rather than always being the helper. In short, it made me a better healthcare provider, and I hope, a better person. The cardiac center you've so generously named after me represents the culmination of a dream, not just my dream, but the shared vision of everyone who believes healthcare should be both technically excellent and deeply humane. Within these walls, patients will find cutting-edge treatments alongside compassionate support. They will be seen as whole people, not just broken hearts in need of repair. I glanced back at the building, my name now prominently displayed above the entrance. I am profoundly honored by this recognition, but I accept it on behalf of every nurse, doctor, therapist, and support staff member who makes healing possible. I accept it on behalf of the Foundation team who turned ideas into action. And I accept it on behalf of the patients who trusted us with their care and taught us what courage truly means. As I concluded my remarks, the audience rose in a standing ovation that felt less like personal acclaim and more like a collective celebration of values we all shared. Dr. Bennett joined me at the podium, presenting a ceremonial key to the center. "The Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center is now officially open," he announced. "May it serve our community with the same dedication, compassion, and excellence that Ellen herself has demonstrated throughout her remarkable career." The reception that followed allowed me to connect individually with many guests, former colleagues sharing memories of challenging cases we had managed together, community leaders expressing appreciation for the Foundation's work, former patients introducing family, members who existed because of care they had received years earlier. Through it all, Jenny remained nearby, no longer the defensive daughter uncomfortable with her mother's recognition, but a proud supporter helping to facilitate conversations and ensuring I didn't overtax my still recovering stamina. As the celebration was in full swing, I noticed a familiar face moving through the crowd, one I hadn't expected to see. Patricia Wells, the Chief Medical Officer from Central Health Systems. the organization that had first licensed my patient safety protocol. We had collaborated over the years, but always professionally, never socially. Patricia spotted me and made her way to my side, offering a warm embrace. "Ellen, congratulations. The center is magnificent." "Thank you, Patricia. I didn't realize you were attending." She smiled cryptically. "I wouldn't have missed it. And actually, I was hoping to catch you. There's a proposal I'd like to discuss. Something that builds on everything you've accomplished here." Before she could elaborate, Jenny approached with a concerned expression. "Mom, I hate to interrupt, but there's a situation that needs your attention." Patricia waved off my apology. "Go ahead. We can talk tomorrow. I'll be in town for a few days." Jenny guided me toward a quiet corner of the tent, speaking in a hushed tone. "There's someone here asking to see you, a woman named Diane Miller. She says she's from the state health department, but Rachel thinks there's something off about her credentials." "Diane Miller?" The name triggered no recognition. "She's been asking very specific questions about the Foundation's funding structures and your relationship with Central Health Systems. Bob thought you should know before she talks to anyone else." A flutter of unease replaced the warm glow of celebration. The State Health Department had no reason to investigate the Foundation. Our records were impeccable, our operations transparent. "Where is she now?" "Bob's keeping her occupied near the refreshment table, the woman in the gray suit." I spotted her immediately, mid-50s, sharply dressed, with an intensity that seemed out of place among the celebratory crowd. She was taking notes as Bob spoke, her expression politely interested but distinctly evaluative. I should speak with her, I decided. Find out exactly what she wants. As I made my way across the tent, Rachel intercepted me, concern evident in her expression. "Ellen, we've been trying to verify her credentials. The State Health Department has no record of a Diane Miller in their investigative division." "Then who is she?" I asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out." Mark did some quick research on his phone. "There's a Diane Miller who works as an investigative reporter for the Regional Health Review, a publication known for exposés on healthcare organizations." The implications settled heavily. On what should have been a day of uncomplicated celebration, someone was potentially gathering information for an exposé. But on what? The Foundation's operations were beyond reproach, the cardiac center fully, vetted and approved by all regulatory bodies. "Let me handle this," I told Rachel, "but stay nearby." As I approached, Bob's relief was palpable. "Ellen, I was just telling Ms. Miller about your remarkable career." "Ms. Miller, this is Ellen Thompson." Herself. The woman extended her hand, her grip firm and professional. "Ms. Thompson, congratulations on this impressive achievement. The center looks extraordinary." "Thank you," I replied evenly. "I understand you're with the State Health Department." A flicker of something? Discomfort? Calculation? Crossed her features. "Actually, I should clarify. I'm researching state-level healthcare initiatives for a comprehensive report. Your foundation's work is of particular interest." The careful non-denial confirmed Rachel's suspicion. "I see. And what aspects of our work interest you most, Ms. Miller?" "Your partnership with Central Health Systems, primarily. The licensing agreement that launched your foundation has become something of a case study in private-public healthcare collaborations." Her knowledge of specific details was concerning. Those arrangements, while not secret, weren't commonly discussed in public forums. "I'm always happy to discuss the Foundation's work," I said carefully. "Perhaps we could schedule a proper interview next week? Today is primarily a celebration with colleagues and family." She smiled thinly. "Of course. Though while I'm here, I was hoping to clarify one point. My understanding is that Central Health Systems is planning a major reorganization that would affect all of their external partnerships, including yours. I was wondering if you'd care to comment on how that might impact the Foundation's future projects." The statement hit me like a physical blow. Central Health Systems was our primary funding partner, the licensee of the patient safety protocol that generated the Foundation's core operating budget. A major reorganization could potentially threaten everything we'd built. More disturbing was the fact that this was the first I'd heard of any such plans. Despite my regular communications with their executive team, including Patricia Wells, who had just spoken with me moments ago. "I think there may be some misunderstanding," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "The Foundation has an excellent relationship with Central Health Systems, and we're in regular communication about all aspects of our partnership." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "So you're saying the reports of their planned restructuring and potential dissolution of external licensing agreements are inaccurate?" "I'm saying this is neither the time nor the place for this discussion," I responded, firmly. "If you'd like to schedule a proper interview with full context and verification of sources, my office would be happy to arrange that." She held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. "I'll be in touch, Ms. Thompson. Enjoy your celebration." As she walked away, Bob moved closer. "What was that about?" "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted, "but I intend to find out." I scanned the tent for Patricia Wells, but she had disappeared, her cryptic mention of a proposal now taking on a potentially more ominous significance. Why had she attended the ceremony if Central Health Systems was planning to alter our partnership? Was her presence damage control? A courtesy before bad news? Or was the reporter working from inaccurate information? Jenny approached, having observed the exchange from a distance. "Everything okay?" "I think so," I said, not wanting to cast a shadow over the day's events. Just a minor misunderstanding. But as the reception continued around me, the question lingered. Had I been so focused on personal healing and family reconciliation that I'd missed signs of trouble in the Foundation's most critical partnership? Was the cardiac center, this monument to my life's work, built on a foundation that might be crumbling beneath it? I pushed the concerns aside as Tyler bounded up, eager to show me something he'd discovered in the cardiac center's educational wing. His enthusiasm couldn't be dampened by my private worries. Today was for celebration. Tomorrow would be soon enough to investigate this potential threat. As we walked back toward the center, I caught sight of Dr. Bennett deep in conversation with a hospital board member, their expressions serious despite the festive atmosphere. When they noticed me looking, they quickly shifted to smiles and raised their glasses in a toast. Another piece of a puzzle I hadn't realized existed until today. Something was happening beneath the surface of this perfect celebration. Something that could potentially threaten everything I had worked for. But I had faced challenges before. I had survived heart surgery, rebuilt my relationship with my daughter, and created a foundation that was improving healthcare across the region. Whatever storm might be gathering on the horizon, I would weather it too. For today, I would celebrate this milestone. Tomorrow, I would begin investigating exactly what Diane Miller knew about Central Health Systems plans and why Patricia Wells had really come to the ceremony. The Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center stood gleaming in the May sunshine, a testament to what I had already accomplished. Now I needed to ensure its future, and the foundations, remained secure, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The morning. After the naming ceremony, I woke before dawn, my mind racing with questions about Diane Miller and her alarming insinuations regarding Central Health Systems. Outside my window, the neighborhood was still wrapped in darkness, the streetlights casting pools of amber on empty sidewalks. I made coffee and settled at my kitchen table with my laptop, determined to investigate before the day's scheduled meetings. A quick search confirmed that Diane Miller was indeed an investigative reporter with the Regional Health Review, known for exposés on healthcare organizations with questionable practices. Her recent articles focused on corporate restructuring that left smaller partners vulnerable, exactly the scenario she had hinted at regarding Central Health Systems. I called Rachel at an hour I knew would be unreasonably early, but she answered on the second ring, fully alert. "You couldn't sleep either," she observed. Not a wink. What have you found? Rachel sighed heavily. Nothing concrete, but plenty of smoke. I have contacts at 3 other organizations with licensing agreements similar to ours. All have heard rumors about Central restructuring their external partnerships, but nothing official. And Patricia Wells? Any idea why she disappeared so quickly yesterday? None. I left messages with her office, her assistant, even her personal cell. Radio silence. I drummed my fingers on the table, considering our options. The foundation board meets at noon. We need more information before then. I'm already on it, Rachel assured me. Mark has been surprisingly helpful, actually. He's reaching out to some business contacts who might have insights into Central's corporate strategy. Jenny's husband, once so dismissive of my work, now leveraging his network on the foundation's behalf. The irony wasn't lost on me. Good. I'm going to call Bob. His foundation has dealt with corporate restructuring before. He might have advice on contingency planning. After hanging up with Rachel, I made another cup of coffee and watched the sunrise gradually illuminate my garden. The roses I'd planted during my recovery were beginning to bloom. Their resilience after winter's hardship a reminder that renewal often follows difficult seasons. My phone rang at 7:30. Patricia Wells herself. Ellen, she began without preamble. I owe you an explanation and an apology for yesterday. I understand you were approached by Diane Miller. You could say that, I replied coolly. She seemed remarkably well informed about Central's plans. Plans no one has bothered to discuss with me or my foundation board. Patricia exhaled audibly. That's because those plans don't exist, at least not in the form she described. Miller is working from leaked documents that present an incomplete and misleading picture. Then give me the complete picture, I insisted. Our entire operation depends on the licensing agreement with Central. If that's in jeopardy, we need to know now. It's not in jeopardy, she said firmly. But things are changing, which is what I wanted to discuss with you yesterday before we were interrupted. Can we meet privately this morning? We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between my home and the hospital. Neutral territory for what promised to be a consequential conversation. I called Rachel and Bob to update them, then showered and dressed carefully, selecting a professional outfit that projected confidence and authority. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few early morning patrons scattered among the rustic wooden tables. Patricia sat in a corner booth, a folder and tablet in front of her, looking considerably more tense than she had at yesterday's celebration. Thank you for coming, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. Let me start by saying that the Foundation's relationship with Central remains one of our most valued partnerships. That isn't changing. But something is, I prompted, declining the server's offer of coffee. My nerves were already jangled enough. Patricia nodded, opening the folder. Central Health Systems is being acquired by Northeastern Medical Consortium. The deal has been in negotiations for 6 months, with the final agreement signed last week. We couldn't disclose anything until then, due to regulatory and legal constraints. The news landed like a stone in still water, ripples of implication, expanding outward. Northeastern was a healthcare giant, known for aggressive expansion and ruthless efficiency measures. And our licensing agreement? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. Will be honored fully, Patricia assured me, sliding a document across the table. In fact, Northeastern sees your patient safety protocol as one of Central's most valuable assets. They want to expand its implementation across their entire network. I skimmed the document, an addendum to our original agreement, offering significantly increased royalties in exchange for exclusive implementation rights across Northeastern's extensive hospital system. This looks almost too good to be true, I said cautiously. What's the catch? Patricia hesitated, fingers tapping nervously on her tablet. Northeastern operates differently than Central. They're more corporate in their approach. They're proposing a closer integration between your foundation and their organizational structure. They want representation on your board, input on future initiatives, and shared credit for the protocol's ongoing development. That's not a catch, Patricia. That's a takeover. I pushed the document back toward her. The Foundation's independence is non-negotiable. It's what allows us to focus on patient needs rather than corporate priorities. I anticipated you'd say that, she replied, producing a second document, which is why I prepared this alternative proposal. It maintains the Foundation's independence while establishing a collaborative relationship with Northeastern. The royalties are lower than their original offer, but still higher than your current agreement with Central. This second proposal looked more reasonable on first reading, a licensing expansion without the controlling strings attached. But something still felt off. Why didn't you mention any of this at the ceremony yesterday? Why let me be blindsided? By a reporter? Patricia had the grace to look uncomfortable. Miller wasn't supposed to be there. We've had a leak somewhere in the transition team. Documents getting to the press before official announcements. I was planning to brief you privately after the celebration, but when I saw Miller, I thought it best to withdraw until I could assess what information she had. That wasn't your call to make, I said firmly. This foundation, that cardiac center with my name on it, they represent my life's work. I deserve transparency. You're right, she acknowledged. And I apologize. But Ellen, Northeastern's resources could expand the impact of your work exponentially. The patient safety protocol could become the national standard. Isn't that what you've always wanted? The question gave me pause. From the beginning, my goal had been to improve patient care on the broadest possible scale. But at what cost? What compromises would Northeastern eventually demand? I need to discuss this with my board, I said finally, and I'd like our legal team to review both proposals thoroughly. Of course. Patricia gathered the documents, handing me both folders. They've requested an answer within 10 days. Their CEO would like to meet with you personally next week. After Patricia left, I remained at the cafe, ordering coffee, and a pastry I barely tasted, trying to sort through the implications. The foundation had always operated independently, guided by patient-centered values rather than corporate interests. Could that independence survive a partnership with a healthcare conglomerate like Northeastern? My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. Just heard from Mark about Central. Coming to pick you up. Don't make any decisions without talking to us. Us. The casual inclusion of herself in foundation matters reflected how completely our relationship had transformed. 6 months ago, Jenny had dismissed my professional life as just a job. Now she was racing to offer support and counsel during a potential crisis. When Jenny arrived 20 minutes later, she wasn't alone. Mark sat in the passenger seat, his laptop open, and Tyler occupied the back, looking solemn beyond his years. Family Emergency Response Team reporting for duty, Jenny announced as I slid into the seat beside Tyler. Mark's been researching Northeastern all morning. Tyler insisted on coming because, and I quote, "Grandma needs her whole family when important stuff happens." The simple gesture, their unified presence in a moment of uncertainty, moved me more than I could express. "Thank you," I managed, squeezing Tyler's hand. "I'm glad you're all here." "So what exactly are we dealing with?" Jenny asked as she navigated toward my home. "Mark said something about a corporate acquisition threatening the foundation." I summarized my conversation with Patricia, explaining both proposals and their potential implications. Mark listened intently, occasionally typing notes on his laptop. "Northeastern has a specific playbook with these acquisitions," he explained as we turned onto my street. "They maintain existing partnerships initially, but gradually increase integration requirements until the smaller entity becomes essentially a subsidiary. I've seen it happen in real estate developments repeatedly. But they can't do that to the foundation, right? Tyler asked anxiously. It's Grandma's foundation. They can't just take it over. They can't take it, I assured him. But they could make our current funding model unsustainable if we don't agree to their terms. The patient safety protocol licensing generates most of our operating budget. Then we need alternatives, Jenny said decisively, pulling into my driveway. Other funding sources, different revenue streams. The foundation can't be dependent on a single partner, especially one undergoing corporate acquisition. Her immediate strategic thinking, focused on solutions rather than panic, reminded me sharply of myself. Perhaps the acorn hadn't fallen so far from the tree after all. By the time we entered my house, Rachel had arrived with Bob Henderson. My living room transformed into an impromptu war room, with laptops open on every surface, phones constantly buzzing with new information, and Tyler appointed official note-taker, his debate training making him surprisingly adept at summarizing complex discussions. The nursing scholarship endowment could be expanded, Bob suggested. My foundation has matching grant programs for educational initiatives. We could potentially double the current funding. And the Cardiac Rehabilitation Center will generate revenue once it's operational, Rachel added. Not enough to replace the licensing royalties entirely, but it provides diversification. Mark looked up from his laptop, where he'd been analyzing the foundation's financial statements. The real issue isn't immediate funding. The foundation has sufficient reserves for at least 18 months of operations. The question is long-term sustainability without compromising mission. Jenny, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly stood. What about other healthcare systems? If Northeastern values the patient safety protocol enough to increase royalties, wouldn't their competitors also see its value? Could we license it more broadly rather than exclusively? The question cut straight to the heart of our dilemma, and a possibility I hadn't considered. The original agreement with Central had been exclusive because they had helped develop and implement the protocol, but the intellectual property rights remained predominantly with the foundation. That would require careful legal navigation, I said slowly. But it might be possible. Multiple non-exclusive licensing agreements rather than a single exclusive one. Exactly, Jenny nodded. Diversify the foundation's partnerships the same way you'd diversify an investment portfolio. No single entity gains controlling influence. The strategy session continued for hours, breaking only when Tyler's stomach growled loudly enough to remind us that humans required food. Mark volunteered to pick up lunch, returning with enough sandwiches and salads to feed a small army. As we ate, the conversation shifted from crisis management to longer-term vision. What did we want the foundation to become? How could we ensure its mission outlasted any single funding partnership? The questions felt both urgent and expansive, forcing me to think beyond immediate challenges toward a sustainable future. By mid-afternoon, we had outlined a preliminary strategy: engage legal counsel to review Northeastern's proposals, research potential alternative licensing partners, accelerate development of revenue-generating programs through the Cardiac Center, explore expanded philanthropic fundraising, and prepare a comprehensive presentation for the Foundation Board meeting, now postponed until the following day. As Rachel and Bob departed with action items, Mark closed his laptop with a satisfied expression. I think we have a viable path forward. Multiple paths, actually. Thanks to all of you, I said, surveying my family with profound gratitude. I couldn't have navigated this alone. You're never alone, Grandma, Tyler declared with absolute conviction. That's what family means. Jenny squeezed my hand. He's right, you know, and not just for emergency strategy sessions, for everything. That evening, after Mark and Tyler had returned home to prepare dinner, Jenny lingered, helping me organize. The notes and documents scattered throughout my living room. Remember when I called you a burden in that hospital room? She asked suddenly, straightening a stack of folders. It seems impossible now that I ever saw you that way. We've both changed, I acknowledged. The surgery forced us to re-examine assumptions we'd both been carrying for too long. I think I was afraid, she admitted quietly. Seeing you vulnerable after surgery confronted me with your mortality in a way I wasn't prepared to face. It was easier to focus on practical problems, finances, recovery logistics, than to acknowledge how terrified I was of losing you. The confession, so honest, so human, bridged a final gap between us. I was afraid too, I told her. Not just of dying, but of losing my independence, my identity. When you suggested assisted living, it felt like you were erasing everything that made me who I am. And now I'm helping you fight to preserve that identity, your foundation, your legacy. Jenny smiled wryly. Life has a strange way of bringing us full circle. Not just full circle, I corrected gently. Forward spiral. We're covering similar ground, but at a higher level of understanding. The Foundation board meeting the next day was unlike any we'd held before. Instead of our usual conference room, we gathered in the Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center's community education space, a physical reminder of what we had already accomplished and what remained at stake. I presented the situation candidly, outlining Northeastern's proposals, our preliminary strategy for maintaining independence, and the potential risks of each path forward. The board members, respected healthcare professionals, community leaders, and financial experts, listened attentively, asking pointed questions that revealed both concern and determination. This foundation was established to improve patient care, not to generate corporate profits, I reminded them in closing. Whatever path we choose must honor that mission above all else. The discussion that followed was robust, occasionally heated, but ultimately unified around a core principle. The Foundation's independence was essential to its effectiveness. By the meeting's end, we had authorized our legal team to draft a counter-proposal to Northeastern, one that would expand the licensing of the patient safety protocol while protecting the Foundation's autonomy and mission integrity. As board members filed out, Dr. Bennett remained behind, studying me with concerned eyes. How are you holding up, Ellen? This couldn't have come at a worse time, right after the naming ceremony, when you should be celebrating. Actually, I reflected, it came at exactly the right time. 6 months ago, I might have accepted Northeastern's first proposal out of fear or uncertainty. Now I know exactly what the Foundation stands for and what it's worth fighting to preserve. And you have quite the fighting force assembled, he observed, nodding toward the lobby where Jenny, Mark, and Tyler waited patiently. Your family has surprised me these past months. I remember them quite differently from your hospital stay. People can change when given the chance, I said simply. Sometimes they just need to see us differently before they can see themselves differently. The next week brought intense negotiations with Northeastern's executive team. Their initial response to our counterproposal was dismissive, but as our legal team stood firm and we quietly began exploring partnerships with 2 of their competitors, their position softened considerably. By month's end, we had secured an agreement that accomplished our core objectives: expanded implementation of the patient safety protocol across Northeastern's hospital network, increased royalties without exclusive licensing restrictions, preservation of the Foundation's governance independence, and a collaborative framework that respected our mission priorities. The victory felt significant but not final, more like a successful battle within an ongoing campaign to protect and advance the Foundation's work. But I was no longer fighting alone. The crisis had revealed the depth of support surrounding me: professional, colleagues who valued the Foundation's mission, board members committed to its integrity, and most surprisingly, a family who had transformed from skeptics to stalwart allies. On the evening after the final agreement was signed, Jenny organized a small celebration at their new Pine Ridge home. The gathering was intimate, Just family, Bob, Rachel, and Dr. Bennett, but festive, with champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Tyler. To the Foundation's independence, Bob proposed, raising his glass, and to the remarkable woman who built it. And to family, Jenny added, meeting my eyes across the table, who finally learned to see that remarkable woman clearly. As glasses clinked and conversation flowed around me, I felt a profound sense of completion, not of my work, which would continue evolving, but of a personal journey that had begun in that hospital room 6 months earlier when my daughter called me a burden. The cardiac surgery that might have diminished me had instead catalyzed a transformation beyond anything I could have imagined. My daughter now saw me as a whole person worthy of respect and admiration. My grandson found inspiration in my professional legacy. Even my son-in-law had discovered a purpose beyond material success through witnessing my foundation's impact. And I had learned that vulnerability, far from diminishing my strength, had ultimately revealed it, not just to my family, but to myself. The woman who had hidden her foundation work for years out of some misguided separation between personal and professional identities now stood fully integrated, fully seen, fully valued in all dimensions of her life. As Tyler regaled us with his latest debate team victory, and Mark discussed the affordable housing development his company was planning, I caught Jenny watching me with a contented smile. "Penny for your thoughts," I murmured when we found ourselves momentarily alone in the kitchen. "I was just thinking how different things could have been," she admitted, rinsing champagne flutes. "If you hadn't stood your ground in that hospital room, if you'd let us bulldoze you into assisted living or taken over your finances. If I hadn't had heart surgery at all," I added. "We might have continued indefinitely in our old patterns. You seeing me as just your practical mother, me keeping my professional achievements separate from my family life." "I'm glad we didn't," Jenny said softly. "This is better. Harder in some ways, but better." "Much better," I agreed, helping her load the dishwasher, though I could have done without the corporate acquisition drama. Jenny laughed. "But think how it brought out Mark's strategic brilliance. He's talking about shifting his entire business focus toward healthcare-related development now. Says it has more meaning than luxury condos. This ripple effect, my life's work inspiring others to reconsider their own, felt like the most meaningful legacy of all. Not just the cardiac center with my name above its doors, or the patient safety protocol implemented in hospitals nationwide, but the subtle shift in values and priorities radiating outward through those closest to me. When I returned home that night, I sat for a while in my garden, listening to the chorus of night insects and watching stars appear in the darkening sky. My healed heart beat steadily in my chest, strong and sure. The burden my daughter had once perceived had become a beacon, illuminating possibilities she hadn't previously imagined for herself, for her family, for the world they inhabited. In the end, wasn't that what healing truly meant? Not just the mending of physical tissue, but the transformation of wounds into wisdom, challenges into strength, endings into beginnings. My cardiac journey had been exactly that. Not just recovery, but renewal. Not just survival, but reinvention. And as the Ellen Thompson Cardiac Center continued its vital work, as the foundation expanded its mission under my guidance, as my family flourished in their newfound understanding, I knew with absolute certainty that the most important healing of all had already taken place. In relationships once fractured, now stronger at the broken places. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.